That has 160 grand above.
Three waiting, upcoming. Is it already recording? Oh, you just... So where's the mute button? I can't see.
To improve access to the meeting for our community. The recording will be published and will be retained by Council in accordance with Council's legal obligations. As a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. Would we please stand for the acknowledgement of country and the opening prayer, please? Ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge that we're hosting this great meeting today on the lands of the great Brangarang people. Pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and pay our respects to all Aboriginal people that may be joining us either online or here today. Our prayer. Almighty God, we humbly ask Thee to bless and guide this council in its deliberations so that we may truly preserve the welfare of the people whom we serve. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming in. We do appreciate you being here in the public gallery at our 3 o'clock meeting. Just like to point out a couple of procedural matters. So these meetings are the place where we as councillors make decisions on a broad range of matters. They can vary greatly in subject, significance and the level of interest and involvement the community has. As part of making these decisions, we're presented with comprehensive information that helps us to form our position. You will find this in our agenda that is on the seats there available. One of the other good things that we can often help us to come to this point is making good decisions is listening to the questions that our community may have regarding an item. We invite our community to have a question on every item that as we go through the agenda, and we invite the questions on that item only. When we get to the end of our agenda, we will have public question time, and if you have questions relating to anything else, we will hopefully try and answer them on the spot. If we cannot answer those questions, we will take the questions on notice and get back to you directly. So just quickly to make those points clear, question time is question time. It is a chance for yourself, the gallery and us as councils to get clarification or further information. It is not the opportunity to make statements. Questions are directed to myself, not to an individual councillor or to staff, and I will redirect the question for answers by hopefully one of our staff or councillors. Please be respectful, consider and clear in your questions. We promise to do the same back to you. Question time is not an opportunity for debate. We will answer the question as best we can or take the question on notice and get back to you. If you would like further discussion, we will follow up with you outside the council meeting time. Each person is allowed 2 questions per item, and it's important that everyone gets time to speak. So thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll just get started on the agenda, and we will come down to item number 7. Is our first main part of the agenda. It's the confirmation from our previous minutes. And ladies and gentlemen, I look to Councillor Benton to move that recommendation of approving the council minutes. Thank you, Councillor, and Councillor Grant. To second it, councillors, anything to say on that recommendation? Forward? No. Does any questions from the gallery on our previous meeting's agenda as listed here? No. I'll put the resolution to the vote. All those in favour? And the motion is carried. We'll move on down to number 8, which is conflicts of interest disclosures. And I'm just going to read a quick snippet in relation to a conflict of interest. Ladies and gentlemen, if one of our councillors has a conflict in accordance with Section 130 of the Local Government Act of 2020, a councillor who has a conflict of interest in respect to a matter must disclose the conflict in a matter required by Council's government rules and exclude themselves from the decision-making process in relation to the matter, including any discussions on the vote on the matter and any actions in relation to the matter. Clause 28.1 of the Council's governance rules requires a councillor to indicate that they have a conflict of interest by clearly stating A, the item of the conflict of interest, whether their conflict of interest is a general or a material one, and the circumstances that arise for them having that conflict. So on that note, I'll hand over to Councillor Harvey Benton, who does have a conflict on one of the agenda items. Councillor Benton.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. On 14.5, I have a general conflict in relation to the recreation reserve at Springless. I'm on the executive.
Thank you, Councillor Benton. You're happy to stand out of the room. Thank you. So we'll continue to go down and we'll go to officers' reports, and we'll go straight to corporate and leisure. Item 13.1, which is our public interest disclosure policy 2023, and introduce Director Brindley. Thank you.
Thank you. So the public interest disclosure policy is essentially what used to be called a whistleblowing policy, and it sets out for members of the public and also council officers and councillors the way in which should it ever be needed to make confidential allegations about corrupt or improper conduct against councillors and or council officers. The policy is published on council's website, along with who to make contact with if anyone ever needs to do that. Our Audit and Risk Committee review our major policies on a recurring basis, and this was one they reviewed recently. I just requested that we obtain an independent legal review of the policy to make sure it's fully compliant with all relevant acts. So that's been done and just resulted in a few minor changes being made to the policy, which is why it's presented today. Because it's a major council policy, we do publish those draft policies for community consultation for a period of 28 days. So this report is seeking endorsement from council to go ahead and make the draft policy available and published for 28 days for community feedback, either to return to a future council meeting to be adopted or to go ahead and adopt it directly if no feedback requiring change is received. So that's the public interest disclosure policy. Thank you.
Thank you for the recommendation. Are there any questions from the gallery on this recommendation? I'll look for a mover, Councillor Grant, and a seconder, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Grant, did you want to speak on the recommendation?
No, I think Director
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. No, any other councillor like to do? Councillor Herry?
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Yeah, I guess just to reiterate the importance of these documents, also highlight that there is an accompanying a document which kind of talks through and provides some background context and further explanation, given as one of those major council policies. But I think it's just important to acknowledge that we always need to be looking how to improve on these critical documents, which are about ensuring that we are held to account and that our community understands the mechanisms and processes which they can utilise to hold us as their governance body and council to account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herry. The council like to talk. Councillor Grant has the move. If you've got nothing further to say in finishing off. Thank you. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. 13.2 is the council plan performance review for Q4 2022 to 2023. Thank you, Director Brindley.
Thank you. So this is a standing recurring council report that provides transparency on council's delivery against the commitments made in the council plan. So the council plan is a 4-year plan which sets out the actions and performance indicators that the council commits to deliver over those 4 years. And this is the quarterly report for the last quarter, which is the end of the 3rd year of the council plan being in force. So this report is just presented for council to note that performance for Q4 of last financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on this recommendation? No. Can I look for a mover, please? Councillor Fuller, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Benton? Councillor Fuller, did you need to talk? No. Councillor Benton? Okay. Right, thank you. Any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation? No, thank you. I'll put the recommendation of the vote. All those in favour? And that recommendation is also carried. Thank you, Director Brindley. I'll now hand over to number 14 is Community and Infrastructure, which is Director Goonan, and 14.1 is the Fossings Lane Bridge Replacement Tender. Thank you, Director Goonan.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. This report is presented to Council to provide details on the tender evaluation for contract C40487 for Fossings Lane Bridge Replacement. The Royal City of Wangaratta has an annual budget for maintenance and replacement of bridges associated with its infrastructure and associated infrastructure, As part of this year's bridge renewal budget, replacement of this bridge has been prioritised due to deterioration in the existing condition. The recommendation is that Council awards the contract to Nelnet, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal documents and discloses the contract price.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions from the gallery on the Fossings Lane Bridge? Okay, can I look for a mover on that, please? Councillor Bussell, thank you. And Councillor Benton as the seconder. Councillor Bussell, do you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's great to see work's being done on these old bridges, and this council is quite methodical every year in replacing some of our bridges across the municipality. And this is the second small bridge in the King Valley in the last few years, so I think it's a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Herry, sorry.
Just being used with the punch. Thank you, Mayor Rees. So I do, acknowledging the importance of our bridges. I don't want to pick on poor Fossings Road Bridge, but I guess I just wanted to raise this one and highlight the environmental sustainability impact section of the council report. Just because I think it's a good example, it's a piece of built infrastructure. I presume the structure is going to be constituted largely of concrete, Director Goonan? Yeah, so obviously our built environment is a huge consideration with respect to emissions that council produces, and I think at least some acknowledgement in that section could be worthwhile going forward. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, notwithstanding that it is considered in our procurement policy and given it a certain amount of weighting, but could be room for improvement to have a bit more detail in that section. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Grant.
Yes, Mr Mayor. What I was going to say was to highlight the fact that Fosangs Bridge actually speaks to the significant Chinese heritage that was part of the valley in the very early days of the municipality. And you know, it's good that we recognise the people who were pioneers and who lived and worked in the area through the naming of the bridge. So it really was just a touch on history.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Well knowing that, well worth knowing. Thank you. Any other council like to talk on Fosangs Lane Bridge? Well, we'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Director Goonan, the price, please.
$618,775, $975.
Thank you, Director Goonan. We'll move on now to item 14.2, which is the Werrali Netball and Multi-Use Courts Development Project. Thank you, Director Goonan.
This report is presented to Council with a recommendation to award contract C40935, which is the reconstruction of the Werrali multi-purpose courts. Werrali Recreation Reserve Netball Court has been in poor condition for some time and no longer supports the needs of...
Just excuse me, Marcus, could you put your microphone on?
It is on, sorry. I just wasn't close enough to it, maybe. And no longer supports the needs of the community. As part of these works, the existing courts will be demolished and 2 netball courts with 2 pickleball courts overlaid will be constructed. The works on site will include the construction of new concrete pavement with an acrylic surface, completing all the auxiliaries, all the associated infrastructure, not limited to paths, drainage, shelters, storage shed, reinstatement of seating and site earthworks. The recommendation is that Council awards the contract, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the documents and discloses the contract price. Can I also say a large thanks to the Werrali Football Netball Club and the Recreation Reserve Committee out there. They've done a lot of work with the officers over the last 2 years to get us to this point. It's probably the quickest that I've seen a court redevelopment come to fruition, and they certainly deserve plenty of thanks for that.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Are there any questions from the gallery on this issue? No, I'll look for a mover, Councillor Bussell, seconder, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Bussell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'm not sure whether ladies from Werrali are more excited, or that I'm more excited about a project like this. It's quite significant to build infrastructure like this. The benefit from young girls to middle-aged ladies, and from ladies and men that play pickleball, and all the community that stand around and talk to each other on a Saturday afternoon at the netball, it's quite extraordinary. And the health benefits and the social benefits around these places over a long period of time, and the life of this infrastructure has got to be, I would assume, 50 to 100 years for something like this. And it's well and truly needed out there. I do like to reinforce what Director Goonan said. The engagement between the community and the staff has been really, really good. The staff, Marcus's staff, I've got to commend them. They've done a magnificent job there. And certainly credit to the community that's engaged with the staff, constructively engaged, and I think have come up with some really, really good plans for this project. So I just urge all my fellow councillors to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussell. Councillor Fitzpatrick.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think Councillor Bussell summed it up perfectly, but all I want to say is finally I'm glad that I'm seeing this come to a council meeting, and I think fantastic for working with our officers, and we really appreciate it, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. Any other councillor? Councillor Grant, please.
Yes, I just want to say that Councillor Bussell isn't the only one that's excited about this, because I see it as a really important creation of a hub in a community like Werrali, which has always been very strong about creating its sporting and social activities around the Rec Reserve. And as Director Vernon said, you know, the officers have worked very closely with the community. They've been, you know, positive and, you know, taking all the necessary steps to encourage council in its bid to allow this particular facility to be developed further, actually, because it's already a lovely place and certainly gives people in our rural communities a focus and a place to go and a place to be, and doing it in a healthy and a way to improve their well-being. So I think it's a fantastic thing. It is one of the things that the rural city of Wangaratta should and does have a strong focus on in terms of, you know, how we support our local and regional communities so that they can have the facilities that make their areas a good place to be.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? Councillor Herry, please.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I just want to also acknowledge the officers' hard work on this one, and also the community's advocacy and work, and acknowledge, I guess, the utilisation that the facilities out there do receive currently, and I do not doubt will continue to receive long into the future. I guess I just want to highlight an aspect of this facility, which it's multi-use, and just briefly, I think we can't underestimate the importance of thinking smarter and finding efficiencies in these sorts of facilities and increasing the diverse ways that their utilisation can be increased even further. They're essential parts of our communities, but they're very expensive, these sorts of facilities, and it comes, I guess, it generates, you know, competing demands, and we've always got to be thinking about how we can get the most value for money. So, just say that a little bit. Thank you, Marys.
Thanks, Councillor Herry. Councillor Bustle, to finish off, anything?
Just vote for it, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bustle. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Director Goonan, the contract price, please.
Contract price is $895,650.
Thank you, Director. We'll move down to item 14.3, which is the annual road reseal for 23-24. Thank you, Director.
This report is presented to Council to recommend the award of contract 40568, the annual road reseal 23-24. As part of the Rural City of Wangaratta's asset renewal program, Council completes an annual road reseal program based on road condition data. The reseal program consists of the preparation for and bitumen sealing of selected roads in the urban and rural areas as proposed under the tender. The recommendation is that Council awards the contract to Boral Resources, authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal, and discloses the contract price.
Thank you, Director. If there's no questions from the gallery, I'll look for a mover of that recommendation, please. Councillor Benton and Councillor Fuller to second it. Councillor Benton, would you like to talk on the recommendation?
Not really, only to say that it's a very important part of the council operation through the year, and would like Councillor Bustles to get going on it.
Good to hear. Councillor Fuller, nothing from you. Any other councillor like to talk on the recommendation? I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Thank you, Director Goonan, for the price.
$741,371.
Thank you. Director Goonan, 14.4 is the light vehicle lease recommendations.
This report is presented to Council to seek endorsement of the proposed spend on Council's new light vehicle fleet leasing arrangement. The new fleet leasing arrangement is based upon a 5 + 5 year contract. The new contract will incorporate the remaining 24 vehicles that Council currently own, as these vehicles are due for replacement. The contract is for supply and operating costs, excluding fuel, of 64 vehicles on a 3 and 5 year lease contracts. Currently, Council leases 40 vehicles on an existing fully maintained and operating lease contract. The existing contract for 13 of these high-use vehicles has expired, and they are currently operating on a month-to-month arrangement. The remaining 27 vehicles will expire in 2025. Analysis of the original cost versus purchase was undertaken over the last 12 months, and it found that costs are marginally in favour of leasing. But the additional benefits of leasing over purchasing are the transition to electric vehicles, which this contract allows for, the no upfront purchase costs, and a safe and compliant fleet consistently.
Thank you, Director Goonan. Director Goonan, I have a couple of questions here from Brian Foxey I'd like to read out. You did answer part of those questions in there, but I'll still read the question out to follow with your answer. Why is Council choosing to lease rather than increasing the overdraft or getting an individual loan? And my understanding is that a lease has a certain tax benefit not available by others means of finance. And as a council, are we not subject to tax, and why wouldn't we increase our overdraft for an amount calculated by the difference between the buy and sell price? I might give to CEO McGrath. Did you want to talk on this?
Sure, thanks Mayor Rees. Thanks for the question, Brian. When we did the first round of leases, and again when considering the second round of lease, we did a full analysis of the capital cost of buying vehicles, incorporating the full life cycle of trading values of the vehicles and the operating costs of those vehicles over time. We then compared all those same factors to the prices that we could get for leasing of vehicles. And we've actually established that it is marginally cheaper for us to lease vehicles than it is to buy vehicles at the moment. It was a little bit more favourable in the first round of leases, and it's become a bit closer in the second round of leases, but we are still financially better off leasing at the moment than we are purchasing. So that's why we've gone down the path of leasing. The other advantage is that actually frees up our capital for other capital projects if we're not spending the capital money on vehicles. This only applies to our light fleet, of course, not to our trucks and plant and those sort of things.
Thank you. Good question, though. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this issue? No. I'll look for a mover of that recommendation. Councillor Herry, and a seconder, please. Looking. Councillor Fuller. Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Herry, do you want to talk on the recommendation?
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Mayor Rees. I guess just briefly, it is good to see the component in this lease that makes way for electric vehicles to come into Council's fleet. It's been a long time coming, and I would have liked to have seen it earlier, and earlier adoption in that, but just because you're late to the party doesn't mean you don't come. So it's great to see that. I just thought that perhaps Director Goonan might speak to the availability of the EVs and kind of just the component, the EV component, the factors that determine how many vehicles might be EV and the timing that they'll come in at, just for the benefit of the public.
Thank you. Director Goonan, please.
No worries, Councillor Herry. So we will receive one electric vehicle is the current arrangements under this first set of vehicles that come in. We won't be trading all of our vehicles in one go, so this will be as vehicles are available, we will take them on through the lease. It is expected, based on the company that we have gone with here being Smart Fleet, that they will be able to deliver 8 electric vehicles within this 27 vehicles. Again, that will just depend on how quickly they can get them into the country and exactly when we are going to want to change them over. So there's a few factors in that, but part of the reason for going with Smart Fleet was that they could offer us more electric vehicles than the other operators, other fleet companies.
Thanks, Director. Councillor Herry.
Yeah, I'll just finish off, I guess, by highlighting, I guess, the importance I see in Council taking leadership on this and leading by example, breaking down some of the myths and misunderstandings around different vehicles, different fuels. We just had an event down at the library, which was a public event, Council partnering with Wainwright Landcare and Sustainability. And unfortunately, I was looking after my daughter at the time, so I didn't get to sit on for the whole presentation. But I mean, there were lots of good questions asked by all accounts, and lots of breaking down of kind of fear of the unknown and increasing people's understanding to I guess, enable people to make better decisions at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herring. Any other councillor like to talk to the recommendation? No? We'll put the recommendation then to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Councillor Benton, could you just announce your, the price?
As I mentioned before, if this was currently fully executed at current rates, it would be $816,000 per annum, but we would never be executing at the full amount because we need to wait for the vehicles to actually be available.
Thank you. Councillor Benton, could you just disclose your conflict again and step out of the room?
A general conflict of interest in relation to this item in that I'm on the executive of the reserve that pertains to.
Thank you. There's a meeting there. Thank you. Director Goonan, could you please go over the recommendation for item 14.5, the Springhurst Neighbourhood Safe Place?
We might need to get another big meeting in progress on stick it on that door as well. This report is presented to Council to endorse the proposal to utilise the Springhurst Community Hall as a designated neighbourhood safer place. The Springhurst community have requested the designation of the Springhurst Community Hall as a neighbourhood safer place. Primary advice from Council and CFA indicated that this building would meet the requirements. The Springhurst Recreation and Community Hall Committee of Management endorsed the proposal. Crown Land Act 1978 gazetted the Springhurst Hall as a neighbourhood safer place back in December 2021. The final piece of the puzzle is for Council to endorse the Neighbourhood Safer Place facility, and then this process will be finalised. The recommendation is that Council endorses the use of the Springhurst Community Hall as a designated neighbourhood safer place.
Thank you, Director Goonan. There are no questions from the gallery on this item. I'll look to Council. Thank you, Councillor Fuller and Councillor Grant who seconded. Councillor Fuller, did you want to talk on the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this endorsement is a timely reminder for everyone to pull out their safety plans and their fire plans and just review and start the preparedness for the coming potential fire season. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Grant.
Only to say that when Council is asked what it's doing to respond to the changes in weather and potential fire season, this is one of the things that we do. And it's just one of many things that Council has on the table in terms of how it responds to the changes in climate.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Any other council like to talk on the recommendation? No, I've put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. Ash, could you just grab? Yes, give it up. Give Councillor. Oh, there he is. He's come back through. Did you get kicked out, didn't you? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll hand it over to CEO McGrath to do item 17, which is advisory committee reports, and we have a biannual audit and risk report. So, thank you, CEO McGrath.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. Our Audit and Risk Committee is required to do a report to Council on its activities twice a year, and this is the first of those due for the financial year, and it's here for Council's consideration and noting.
Thank you. And 18.1, which is the minutes of the advisory committee meetings there too. Oh, sorry, we do need to deal with that recommendation. I haven't gone over that. Should have combined them in. If there's no questions from the gallery, I'll look for a mover of that there. Councillor Fitzpatrick and Councillor Bustle to second it. If there's no, thank you, Councillor Fitzpatrick. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And that recommendation is carried. I'll move again to 18.1, minutes of the advisory committee meetings for the audit and risk committee. Thank you, CEO McGrath.
These are the minutes of the advisory committee, and the only one we have is the audit and risk committee for its 16th of May meeting.
Just for noting those. So again, any questions from the gallery? Say no. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Fuller, Councillor Herry, to second it. If there's no one to talk on that recommendation, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And the recommendation is carried. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on. There's no notice of motion, no urgent business, but we do have public question time, and I'll read a couple of questions firstly, and then ask that if you want to ask a question apart from the questions that have been here, could you please stand, state your name and then your question. Our first question is just a records keeping process here that we had a question from Claire Russell, and it was taken on notice in July's scheduled council meeting, a reply that Claire was replied to, and that matter is now closed. I'll go to question number 2. Question number 2 is from Julie Dart. I can't see Julie in the audience, but I'll ask the question here. Julie Dart has 2 questions directed at Council, Director Goonan and also Brendan McGrath. I would like to know whether Wangaratta Lawn tennis courts will be open for use. I would like to know which local Indigenous groups the Council is engaged with regarding to the Merrill Park plan, and looking forward to our response. Thanks, Julie Dart. I'll hand over to Director Goonan in relation to this question.
Thanks for the question, Julie. Officers having ongoing conversations with the Lawn Tennis Club, and access to complete maintenance works for the upcoming season is ongoing. The ecological assessments that officers are waiting on are due later in September. We are looking to open for the start of the season, which is mid-October, if not before. The answer to the second question is that council officers engaged with the Bangarang to develop the Merrill Park master plan.
Thank you, Director Goonan. I'll go down to question number 3, and this is from Cassandra Pollock for the upcoming council meeting. Numerous nations are experiencing catastrophic fires in the northern hemisphere summer. Australia is staring down the barrel of what is predicted to be a demanding bushfire season and extremely hot summer. Question 1. What emergency preparations are being carried out at the Wangaratta Council to protect the lives of residents from both hazardous air quality due to bushfire particulate matter in the air and extreme temperatures? The frail, the aged, the homeless, the disabled and those without air conditioning are at particular risk. That's the first question. And question number 2 is what changes or improvements in the Wangaratta emergency preparations have occurred in the last 3 years since the horrific black summer of 2019-2020. Again, I look to you, Director Goonan, for a response.
Thank you for your questions, Cassandra. I will combine the 2 answers if that's okay, and I'm happy to clarify outside of this meeting. So the state and territory governments have and will continue to have the primary responsibility and accountability for emergency management. The 2019-20 Royal Commission reinforced the approach that managing natural disaster risk is built from a shared responsibility involving all levels of government, community, individuals and the private sector. There are many agencies involved in emergency management and they all play critical roles. Council play a supporting role in both of the examples that you've mentioned in your questions, and we do this by supporting the states in coordinating agencies, sending out information, social media, opening the library as a cool smoke-free space, free pool tickets, setting up evacuation areas, in-home help, etc. The Royal Commission also acknowledged the impact of climate change as having a driver on more severe and intense natural disasters, and this was also welcomed by Council. Council have continued to work on reducing emissions, increasing eco-diversity and caring for our flora and fauna. Officers will also review and continue to work with external agencies on making sure our municipal vulnerable persons register is up to date and current.
Thank you, Director Goonan.
There have been many changes since the 2019 bushfires. Some of these we can see and some of them are less obvious but still very significant.
Officers have recently completed work in the recovery space while increasing the awareness of disasters and community resilience. There have also been significant changes to Council's emergency management planning with the introduction of the Municipal Emergency Management Committee, which is a state government organisation, and the Regional Emergency Management Committee. Council have also received funding and are currently completing works at the showgrounds to set up this area as a major emergency relief area. Council's legislative municipal fire prevention officer continues to inspect and issue fire prevention notices, and these are already up on last year's numbers. Works are well underway to establish an additional bushfire place of last resort, which has now been approved, and fine-tuning of Council's emergency relief capacity is consistently reviewed, and new staff are currently undergoing incident control awareness training. Council will also continue to advocate and work through the MEMC and REMC to get the best outcomes we can for our community.
Great, thank you, Director. Another question from Brian Fuchs in public question time. I've got 2 questions here.
Beg your pardon, Mary.
Sorry.
I just wanted to jump in and add something, I guess, to the response on the previous question. But yeah, I think our vulnerability to, as Director Goonan kind of elaborated on, a changing climate is really important. And I just want to highlight a piece of work that has its origins in an Audit and Risk Committee internal audit, which considered Council's lack of a climate adaptation plan or similar, a climate adaptation strategy, considered that a gap and something that Council needs to address. So Council took that recommendation on board and is currently engaging in a piece of work, and we've got a contractor looking at the climate vulnerability, doing a vulnerability assessment of our municipality. That's a piece of work which is going to feed in, I guess, to our understanding of what our vulnerabilities are, and that includes vulnerabilities to heat and to smoke and floods and various forms of disaster and climate impact. And then once we understand the vulnerabilities, it will better enable us to actually respond and prepare for those impacts. So perhaps I guess councillors haven't had that item come up at a briefing, but maybe it's something we could consider, because I'd certainly like to understand that piece of work a little bit more. And I guess it's whether it comes this season or the next, I think we just have to keep in mind that it's a matter of odds, and we're loading the climate dice against our favour. And just a last snippet was I was at a conference recently, and CSIRO are conducting a little bit of work which is looking at vulnerability, not specifically for us, for rural city of Wangaratta, but statewide, Victorian councils, and they were looking at floods and roads and the relationship between flooding and roads, and we're pretty familiar with that. We were actually one of the higher councils in terms of exposure, but they were looking at the 1% or 1 in every 100 year sort of probability events, and the 5% or 1 in 20 year events. And counterintuitively, I guess, the costs associated with the 5% or the events that happen every 20 years roughly, not the biggest ones, cumulatively is recognised to be more significant just because they happen more often. And the thing is, the probabilities are shifting, the goalposts are shifting, so what used to be a 5% is coming down. It might be a 3% or a 2%, or is going up the other way. It might be at 10%, so 1 in every 10 years instead of 1 in every 20. So it's something we really need to keep up on and on top of in this council, and yeah, look forward to that piece of work coming to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to another question. So thank you, Brian Fox. Question is, would Council make it publicly known when the details of a vehicle is submitted to the auction house for disposal? CEO McGrath.
Thanks, Mayor Rees. Thanks, Brian. Brian, I reckon we've agreed to this a number of times in the past, and I've confirmed while we were sitting here, and we are actually doing it. I would note that we're not selling many vehicles anymore, and we'll be selling less and less because we did move to leasing vehicles some time ago. So it's only the older fleet that will be gradually getting sold off that hasn't moved into a leased vehicle yet. So you'll see less and less vehicles available because they'll be leased and returning to the lease company at the end of their leases, not sold.
Thank you. Question 2A. Would council negotiate with the railways to have the standard gauge cutting preserved to become part of the excellent bicycle and walking tracks we have here in Wangaratta? So the standard gauge means the dive down through there. Yep, thank you. So you go.
The answer is we've actually been advocating, Brian, to the ARTC to fill that dive in. That's because our plans for that area see that being added to both car parking down in that area as well as widening the public spaces and promenades for members of the public down there. So it's very much been our desire that it gets filled in, and that is currently the ARTC's plan for the cutting once the works to the track are complete.
Thank you. Question B is in relation to that. Is council negotiating with the railways management to make the goods shed available to the Wangaratta Historical Society? I'll answer that myself. We were down there with the ARTC members yesterday, and the shed is currently online on ARTC line available for occupation upon a proposal being put forward, and it's open to the general public to put any proposal forward that they feel, and ARTC will make that direction themselves on which way to go. So we look forward to a number of proposals going forward to that goods shed.
Thank you, Mayor Rees. Beg your pardon, sorry, I'll jump in. Yeah, just I guess in response to that question, which I don't have in front of me, but relating to the opportunities with the dive, I mean, the car parking was mentioned, but I would see that as a huge opportunity for us to consider as part of our broader perspective on transport, considering different forms of transport as critical pieces to the future transport puzzle, and those concepts of active transport corridors and green corridors. I mean, it could just be lending itself to that purpose perfectly, potentially.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Could you please step forward if you have a question, please? Please state your name and then your question. Thanks for coming. Yep, that button.
Claire Russell. I'd just like an update on the situation with the trees that are slated for having a problem in Merriwell Park.
Sure.
And also a second question is, when will Merriwell Park be reopened?
Thanks, good questions. I might lean across to you, Marcus, on this one.
Yep. So Claire, as per previous correspondence, we're still waiting for the final ecological report, which will then allow us to move to the next steps in that process, which will be a planning permit application and some further assessment. As far as when the park will be open, we are looking to open the tennis club as quickly as we possibly can, and depending on what the report says and what our further assessments do will depend on when we can open the park. We are looking to open it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Claire. Are there any other questions from the gallery, please? Thanks, Marie. There's a little mouth speaking thing like that. Thanks, Marie.
I wasn't going to say too much, but nobody's taking notice of me anyway.
That's not true, Marie. We do take a lot of notice of you, so please state your question, not your statement.
Currently we're on the dog rescue. People over there aren't too happy with you.
That's your words, Marie, not ours, not what we've heard.
Please read what was said. This is just before when I've been sitting here. Someone asked me to read it out. Because the Dog Rescue are going to...
Is it a question, Marie?
No, I'm just going to tell you. Oh my gosh, the Dog Rescue pushed to the limit. Wangaratta councils starting to bring their fur babies to Albury, and they already pushed through that the Dog Rescue's hundreds more will be euthanized, and it just says that. So people over in Albury would aren't happy with you, and I'd like to know who, I asked the last time, who made the decision. I heard it was half you said yes, half said no, and then one person made the final decision.
That's not the case. It was at a council decision and council made the decision to go forward with it. I wasn't here at the meeting, but councillors who were here had made that decision to go forward with that.
Just to clarify, I beg your pardon, Mary's, it was a decision made, and I think I made this point at the last meeting, a decision made under delegation by officers, but as the decision-making governance body, councillors are responsible for decisions made under delegation, and we had awareness of it. I mean, in hindsight, it very well could have been an item that councillors could have brought to one of these public forums and taken it on as a decision that we did make. And I guess I'll put my hand up and acknowledge that that's something I could have considered at the time and didn't, perhaps.
Did you agree to close it? You know,
I personally see merit in the decision and therefore didn't request for it to come in myself and look to overturn that. I think the strategy that council is taking with respect to an arrangement with a fixed term and considering alternate options, such as the feasibility of setting up something in-house, is a reasonable approach.
But you've mainly only did to say that 500,000 over 2 years. Is that right? That you'd do that to animals? I'm astounded, absolutely astounded.
We haven't done anything to animals. Animals are being looked after.
Yeah, but you closed it when they're already full to the brim over there at all the...
They're not full to the brim because they were not allowed to take them. Those comments that you are saying there are from someone. Stephen Swart, have we had dogs go up there and been turned around because we haven't had the available space up there?
No, we have not. At the last meeting, we talked about the capacity of the pound up in Albury to take animals. I visited that facility myself with Brendan before we entered the contract, and it was very clear to us that there's a lot of capacity still available in that facility. I've made inquiries today about the capacity within that facility to take more animals, and they are very far away from being full to the brim.
Well, that's right. I'd love to find out if that's the truth. Because there's so many young people that are cruel to animals. And I'm just, yeah, what a world we live in, that people are so cruel to animals. And I'm going to find out if that's true or not.
Well, that's what they've stated there. There's no reason for us not to say. Thank you, Stephen. Yes?
I'll find out about that.
I think the statement about, I think you are inferring that we are being cruel to animals, is something that's simply not true. We made this decision to go to this contract partly because we want to deliver the best possible service to our community and look after animals as best as possible. Part of that is a change in service to make sure that we return lost animals to their owners as quickly as possible. That includes us actually trying to identify owners here in Wangaratta as quickly as possible, getting in contact with those owners and returning those animals to them as quickly as possible. And in fact, the numbers that I have for July and August prove that that is playing out. In total, our officers have picked up 32 animals over those 2 months. 24 of those were returned to their owners very quickly because they are registered and microchipped. So we are able to identify those owners and get in contact with them. The 8 animals that went up to Albury during that time were not registered or microchipped, or the information on the microchip was outdated, so we weren't able to identify those owners quickly. So the foundation of that decision is to try and get these animals back to their owners as quickly as possible.
Yeah, but why couldn't you just done it here by keeping the pound here?
Because the decision was made on a financial basis as well, and that was worked out to be that way. So thank you, Marie. Unless there's another question, please take your seat.
Thank you, Pardon.
Hang on.
Could I just provide...
Just one more. Who is monitoring, as you say, and reporting?
Monitoring?
Yeah, and reporting to the public on the pound. Who is monitoring and reporting to the public on the pound?
Stephen, did you want to answer that one?
I can, thank you. Thanks for that question. Just like any of our other contracts, council will be managing this contract and monitoring the performance of that contract. With this contract, we have specific requirements set out in that contract that the Albury Pound have to meet, and we will regularly monitor that and make sure that those are being met. When it comes to animal welfare, the RSPCA still has a role in looking after that, and that gets done in many different ways. One of those ways is to make sure that the pounds that are available across the state are inspected for compliance on a regular basis, and Albury Pound is no exception.
Thank you, Jack.
Final comment from me, Mary, is I just wanted to, beg your pardon? Yours? It's all right, I'll just, that's right, yeah. Look, yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that in hindsight, perhaps it would have been good had we done the feasibility work ahead, but it just wasn't the case. But with a view to the future, and all that Stephen has said with respect to our learnings out of the current engagement, and also the community's learnings and experience and things such as the concerns you've raised today, I personally think that in the future, the decision-making process relating to the next stage and that whole concept of feasibility about bringing it in-house and lessons learned and what it's been like in the interim period, and a really robust community engagement process on this matter is definitely warranted, and I will certainly commit and advocate for that at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Marie. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Yes, sir. Come forward. Just state your name, sir. Got it. Yeah, good.
My name is Rob Barnett. I'm a recent resident of the area, and I just have a query in regard to council about the legality of exporting your administrative ability across the state. As you realise, of course, Albury's part of Victoria, part of New South Wales, and in the circumstances, I question as to whether or not there is constitutional ability to be able to transfer the administration section of looking after the dogs interstate. I think if in fact the position was that the pound was in Wodonga, I'm not absolutely certain that there would be no difficulty at all. However, in view of the fact that it's a question of state sovereignty, and I'm not sure whether or not you were able to transfer or export the administration of animals across state borders. And this is a question which perhaps might be best put to your legal advice as to whether or not this is constitutionally possible.
Thanks, Ron. Senator McGrath, do you have a response to that, or do we take it on notice?
No, I'm happy to respond to that. Thanks for your question. We have considered that matter. There are many examples where services are provided under contract across state borders. Waste management, for example, has been doing that for many, many years, where both New South Wales and Victorian councils have joint collection contracts with organisations like Cleanaway and others. Leisure facilities are regularly managed by Melbourne-based leisure providers in other states on behalf of local governments. So in terms of our review of the situation, we're unable to see any reason why we can't do that. I did ask the question of our solicitors, and they were unable to identify any reason why that would be a problem as well. So to the very best of our knowledge, there is no issue. Rod.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your question, Rod. And Cassandra, then you're next.
Sorry, Claire.
Thanks, Claire.
Just in relation to the animal situation, what do council propose in terms of reporting back about the number of animals that have gone up? I know that Mr. Schwartz said has the numbers for this month. Is that going to be an ongoing reporting thing? Because I think that the community deserves a report on a monthly basis about the animal, what the situation is with the animals, so we can keep abreast of that. So will
Thanks,
council-
thanks Claire, good question. Stephen? You get regular updates through your department, obviously?
Yeah, so as part of managing this contract, we get regular updates from Albury Pound in terms of the numbers. We obviously also keep track of our own activities. I have access to those numbers to be able to answer questions at council meeting, into the future, as I've done in the last couple of months.
So can we have that reported rather than have to be asked for each month? Can it be reported in the Chronicle, on your website? Can we have that?
We could look at doing something, Stephen, in regard to your response.
I was just going to say we're in councillors' hands. If the council want to receive a regular report on this, we're very happy to provide it. We'll obviously have to give consideration to what information might need to be kept commercially in confidence, but certainly in terms of numbers being transported, those sort of things, I wouldn't see any issue.
Yeah, and one's returned, so we could certainly look at it on our website. How do councillors feel about that? Or we can have a discussion about that in...
I guess, not with, appreciating that maybe some more immediate interim reporting is required, but I think absolutely a report that details that sort of information would be just the sort of thing I would envisage that would be part of that future decision-making consultation process, such that, like via our new community engagement portal, for example, when it gets up and running down the track.
Thank you for that.
Not against having that.
Councillor Grant?
And what this discussion actually says to me, it's not just about the reporting. I think we need to shine the light back into the community around animal welfare as a the way that people do this. You can't say, well, it's council's fault, or the pound's not big enough, or this is not, good enough. It's people need to take responsibility for their animals, and that should be the first part of the conversation. The other is the framework that goes around that. But I think the most important thing is looking after our animals, and nothing that we say or do in terms of the pound will change that unless people change the way they behave.
Yes, but you have made a situation where you are, the rural city of Wangaratta is not taking responsibility for its lost animals other than sending it interstate.
We are taking responsibility, and I think what also needs to be understood, at the time that this was made a decision, the RSPCA also pulled the pin on the service that they were providing.
Yes, well, that's why you're blaming the RSPCA.
No, I'm not blaming the RSPCA, I'm simply telling you what actually happened.
Well,
so that complicated the decision making around that, and I think Director Swart has outlined the way forward, and I think we're not entirely comfortable, and we're going to have to work through a lot of issues, but I think, we need to, as a community, perhaps reassess the way we deal with our animals.
I'm asking council to be responsible for the decision they've made and let the citizens of the rural city of Wangaratta know what is happening to the animals on a monthly basis, so people can make an informed decision about how they feel about this. Because at the moment, it's not being stated to the public, so
it's never been stated.
Feel about it. It's also what
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you.
This is becoming a debate.
It is, and we're not here, this is a question.
question, and they've been answered.
Thank you, Councillor Benson. Here. Cassandra Pollock.
Are you willing to take on the Wodonga Dog Rescue when they
Excuse me,
come?
there is no question there. Thank you, Cassandra.
This is a follow-up question to the answers to the questions I submitted earlier in the day.
Yes.
I would like to ask, how is the vulnerable persons register compiled? Does it contain information such as which residents of Wangaratta do not have air conditioning? Just to give one example, what kind of information is on the vulnerable persons register?
Thank you. Marcus, do you have any update on that one?
Yes, so the Vulnerable Persons Register is compiled differently for each event, and it's maintained with Victoria Police. So Victoria Police are actually the agency who go out and door knock people and check that they're okay. To my knowledge, it does not contain addresses of people who do not have air conditioning, but it does contain addresses of people who would be vulnerable in certain disaster events.
Thanks, Cassandra.
Just to provide additional angle, I guess, response to that. I certainly think that climate adaptation plan would be a plan that would look at our community and maybe at a more high level. I'm not sure if it would get down to that sort of list, but maybe it would reference something such as that. But definitely factor in the factors which predispose certain demographics or groups to being at greater vulnerability. But perhaps that's something we'll find out when we get a briefing on that in the future.
Thanks, Jack. So, ladies and gentlemen, there's no further questions. Yeah. Marie, you have one more question. Yeah. Come forward, and that will be it. Yeah, right. Is it a question or a statement, Marie? No, I only want the question.
Why can't we listen to you? Why can't we speak?
I've just given you the opportunity to speak. You've already asked 2 questions. I'm giving you one more opportunity for a third. So ask your question. Marie, ask your question.
Are you willing to take on the Wodonga rescue?
Are we willing to take on the Wodonga rescue?
Someone just said the house Wangaratta animals is wrong. Why can't Wangaratta Council sort something out? Wodonga rescue and the animals coming to us and just don't know about that. This is what's coming up on Wodonga rescue.
Well, that's not what we're hearing, Marie. Our dogs that have been transported, that were either stored here in Wangaratta and now they're shifted to Albury Wodonga, are safe and secure, as Stephen Swart has said, and that's what we're concerned about. So thank you for your question. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's no further questions, I'll declare the council meeting closed. Thank you for your attendance and have a good afternoon.